Hi, I'm Bill Birnbauer. I'm absolutely delighted to have with me today Richard Baker, a multi-award-winning journalist who's mastered every conceivable platform from print to podcasts to documentary making. How are you, Richard?
Good, Bill. Great to be with you.
Thrilled that you're here. Mate, you worked for The Age and the SMH for over 20 years, had a brilliant career, won lots of awards, but left in 2022. Why was that?
So, in 2022, I had a big moment, in my professional career where I was in my mid-40s and had been at The Age since I was 21. And I discovered that I'd hit the knack. I was making my fourth investigative sort of true crime podcast at The Age, and fair to say, it wasn't what senior management really wanted at the time. I think they've changed their mind on that, and I was growing frustrated. Like, I could see that that's out of step, and so there were some difficulties in making it. It was a very successful podcast, but it was launched after I left. But it went to number one on the podcast charts for a while, which was great. But I saw an opportunity to do my own thing and break free, I guess, of having roadblocks or impediments in your way. And management's got every right to. They pay you to direct you how they think you should be working as a journalist. No, we want you to focus more on digital, or just stories from paper, or we want you to, why don't you try 60 Minutes? We've already got that brand, whatever. So I've got no issue. They have every right to do that. But I just saw it myself. I could sit here, and I've seen it at The Age, as I'm sure you have in the past as well, where you have those guys who get bitter and become a bit of a toxin around the place. It's not as good as it used to be, and I just didn't want to be that person. So yeah, that's why I left and saw an opportunity. I'm good at what I do. I already had a couple of really good podcast sort of investigations, and really underlying that was I wanted to own my own intellectual property. So for the podcasts and the things I created at Nine and The Age that did really well, I knew that film producers and other things were interested in those storylines, but they didn't negotiate with me. They had to negotiate with management because they owned the intellectual property.
Just before we move to your new venture, Southern Ocean Media, what drew you to podcasts while you're still working for Nine newspapers? What was the attraction?
Much more immersive storytelling. So print, great, but it's really difficult to attention spans, for one, is with audience. I think that's been declining for 20 years. Podcasts are great because they're transportable. You can be anywhere when you're listening to them, but what I found was people make time in their day to listen. It's like a treat. It's not a chore. I should be doing this. So it's an intimate form of storytelling. And so for me, my first entree into that was back in 2016. I'd been covering the story of Phoebe Handschuck, a young Melbourne woman who died in the most bizarre, circumstances, found at the bottom of a garbage chute, having presumably fallen 11 stories down it. Then there was a whole family situation, very powerful family, older boyfriend, all of that, and not really well investigated. I'd been writing on that for years on and off, and just felt I hadn't done that story justice. So I remember coming into The Age one day, and Serial had made a big impact in the US, and obviously like millions of others listened. Thought, wow, this has held my attention. I've learned a lot about this because I've got to relate to the characters. So I said, with Phoebe's story, can we have a crack? And Mark Forbes was the editor at the time. He said, yeah, go for it. And so we did, and we had to bring in some expertise and external help because writing for audio is very different for writing. But it was a very successful podcast, and for the first time, I remember that over summer after I released it, people, friends and stuff who were not interested in media or journalism and wouldn't have known any stories I'd written, maybe other than on the Essendon drug saga, all of a sudden at summer barbecues and catch-ups, they were asking me really in-depth, pointed questions about the podcast, and they couldn't get enough of it. I'm going, wow, they've never talked about that when I've written a story about bribery or corruption or whatever before. So it told me this is the way to go.
What were the main challenges moving from a large media organisation to running your own show?
There's a few different challenges that really became apparent from the get-go. Losing your fortnightly salary, so all of a sudden you have to find a cash flow and manage it. It's very different in terms of your budgeting for family life as well as running a business. So instantly you've got to look commercially, like, well, where am I getting my money from? How am I going to do it? Am I going to, I'm growing a business, so you've got to be prepared. It's not going to, businesses can take a couple of years to get off the ground. I didn't have any seed capital because I didn't want outside influence or to be directed by people who just wanted to make money. That may change, as I've got more scale and things behind me. But so that was a challenge. And then managing your time. All of a sudden, you've got a lot of freedom because you're your own boss. So it's very tempting. You go, I can just take today off, or I'm not feeling like that, and distraction. So you do have a lot of time. You're starting afresh. There's lots of stories you'd like to do, but actually, what are the ones that are going to evolve and they're actually going to turn into something that a commissioner, because that's who you need resources to make it. Like, I need producers, sound designers. I can't afford to pay for all of those. So I need to team up. So I need to sell to an ABC or to Listener or, whoever. So that development time of making a really clear decision, this is the story I'm going to invest my next 8 weeks into. And it can take 6 to 8 weeks to win people's confidence, know that you've got a story. So then you've got to fund that development time yourself.
So what do you like about it?
I like the freedom. I like choosing what I want, the stories I want to tell. And I don't generally, been really lucky with so I've now done 7 long form narrative podcast series. I'm writing an 8th and about to sign a contract for a 9th, imminently. The stories choose me, in a way. I don't go chasing a particular thing, like the Aaron Patterson case. I had a fair few calls from different people going, would you like to go down, you're looking to this, to do that. I get the obvious attraction to it, but I thought every man and his dog is going to do that story. And what can I do that separates it from the pack? So I just thought, I'll leave that one to, I think the mainstream media is going to handle it well, which they have. And I'll focus on something, a bit more under the radar. But I just love it. I love talking to people. I love getting off the beaten track. And I think an element of the thing, what I do, I think I've done well, is I'm good at finding relatable, ordinary people who get caught up in extraordinary situations. And they're a great window into what can look like, a big geopolitical soup or, a mess of the justice system. But it's actually by talking to those people and then threading their story through, that's a great way to explain kind of how society deals with a problem or, something like that. So that's my window.
Could you let us know, what is Southern Ocean Media? Is it a production house, an ideas factory? What is it? What do you do?
It is a production house, and it's a bit of an incubator of ideas. I've also, from time to time, when I've had the time, used it to do some consultancy work. So I do enjoy stepping out of, being the main man, driving your own thing, and just being a bit of a gun for hire on certain projects where you can just be a pair of ears and eyes and help guide, but you're not managing all the day-to-day relationships with people and stuff. So that's the three things, but primarily, yeah, I use Southern Ocean Media to develop and bring stories or bring projects to the point of where I can take them to either directly to a commissioning platform, or team up with a bigger production company if it's going to be a television project or streaming. And so I do, through Southern Ocean Media, I do podcasting, documentary, and I've got a couple of scripted things I wanted to get into scripted writing as well, which are now, I've got some development deals with a couple of different production companies, which is good.
Okay. How did you cope financially? Did you get a payout from Nine?
I was one of the stupid ones that were left without a redundancy. I would have loved one, it would have been awesome, but I wasn't going to get one. So, you know, I left, obviously I had, you know, some long service entitlements and other things, so I had a little bit of a buffer that probably gave me 3 to 4 months where I had an income sitting there to pay my mortgages and bills and things like that, and to fund a bit of travel to develop the stories. And then I had to sell. And I was lucky enough to sign 2 contracts with Listener, Southern Crossroads Stereo, in January 23, and I left September 22. And I spent those months developing the 2 ideas I had when I left. And the other crucial thing I would say for people stepping out is I got a manager. So I'm managed by Kathy Baker, no relation, CNC talent. She looks after Andy Rule and you know, a lot of Mark Fennell, a lot of people in our game, and that really helped because we're, you know, like old-fashioned newspaper journalists, like we don't really like talking numbers and selling ourselves that much. We're not good advocates for that in a business sense. And I knew if I could just say to people, talk to Kathy, you know, she'll sort this out and she knows what she's doing. And that took a lot of pressure off me and allowed me to focus on what I do and what I like to do rather than get tied up in that stuff.
Where do you publish?
I publish when I publish through whoever I'm working for, whoever I sell the project to. I've done obviously Listener, SCA, SBS, and then in the production space, TV side of things, I've got some contracts with Dream Chaser, BBC Studios, project with Cordell Jigsaw. So just, yeah, spread them around like that. And just, it's the key is relationships. It's like knowing the story you want to tell, being able to demonstrate that you can execute it, that if it's a documentary or a podcast about real events, that you've got the material, you've got the interviews, you've got the people's buy-in is really important. And obviously that you know the story you want to tell and why you want to tell it. That gives those places confidence. And then the more you get to know people in the industry, you can sort of go, I think this is a good fit, or I know they're looking for something like this in their slate. They don't have that. So I'll take that to them first and say, hey, would you like to buy in on this? Southern Ocean Media, I am later this year, if I get the time, I've done some recordings about to launch a weekly podcast. So the industry is unfortunately like very heavily geared to kind of chat, always on podcasting. So when you're doing the narrative series are more expensive, usually more legally risky, production heavy. It's harder to cut through with those than it used to be because it's just the market's very crowded. I'm having the podcast, the weekly thing I want to do is diving into conspiracy theories and explaining how they start and why they are rearing their heads now and what's behind them, who are they benefiting, and is there validity? You know, they often start for a reason. So what was the spark that lit that fire? And unpacking that with a co-host. So our demo is really good. It's just getting the time together. Busy schedules.
Will that have advertising? Is that what you're after?
Yeah, so we're going to build
sponsorship or
advertising. At the start, you know, if a sponsor wants to come on board, we'd certainly look to that to mitigate production costs and time. But we also don't want it to be tied to anything. You know, we want it to be independent, like sort of like a bit underground and authentic. So it's a place where you can really be yourself. And we think we can grow a big audience there. There's a lot of people interested in stuff, and you know, no one's doing it in Australia. And there's plenty of Australian conspiracies as well.
Your stated aim was becoming the Southern Hemisphere's best independent studio for investigative or narrative podcasts for a global audience. Have you been able to achieve that yet?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's a big aim, isn't it? But yeah, I'm pretty happy with really what I'm coming up 3 years out to have produced. I've got 3 long form series out now in the market, all very different. But you know, 2 of the 3, I've been able to on sell or turn around the IP and turn it into another thing, which is really what was underpinning this business model. It's creation of something, get paid to do it and produce something good there, but use that as a demonstration, if you like, or even a pilot to go, you know what, this could inspire a documentary, this could inspire a limited series, and to use that audio and the podcasts there to be that stepping stone for me to take into that world, because that's the world I want to crack. I feel like I know how to make really good narrative podcasts. I've got a good sense of that, and also I don't try not to stay in one lane with the stories. So I don't want to be known as, you know, the guy who just does, cold cases or whatever. I want to go to different places and, you know, just hear how the world works from people who've been caught up in stuff. So yeah.
Yep. In a recent podcast series, you went to the well-known story about the French Secret Service blowing up Greenpeace's Rainbow Warrior in New Zealand. I like that you took a slice of a bigger story and dug deeper. What attracted you to that angle?
I was always interested in the Rainbow Warrior story because it's a well-known story. It's kind of hard to believe that those events are unfolded that way and that France would mount such an attack. But then when you look back, you can see why they did it as well. But yeah, Norfolk Island, such a small frame setting for a story. It's quirky, it's unique. I thought a few years ago, there's a great 24-hour kind of ticking clock scene or situation there where 4 French agents involved in blowing up the Rainbow Warrior are on the island. The handful of police and locals on the island that are in the know are told, don't let them go, don't confront them until more backup arrives. So this is cat and mouse thing, so you've got all of that. No one had spoken to the locals before, and then I thought it'd be interesting to see what was going on behind the scenes at higher levels of Australia and New Zealand and these relationships and stuff. And I went to the National Archive and found this unopened file with Norfolk Island. It was Rainbow Warrior Incident, Norfolk Island involvement. So it was pretty much what I was looking for, and I was able to use that file to then go from quirky locals and cops chattering these French guys on the island to bigger picture, you know, how is the Australian government playing this very delicate, you know, situation in the Pacific where New Zealand was sort of in our bad books because they banned American nuclear armed warships from visiting their ports. It was sort of tearing at the fabric of ANZUS from the Australian and American perspective. French were doing their thing there. Did we want to pick a fight with them? We want to help the Kiwis, but we don't want to help them that much. So I just thought, it was a great framing. The framing and the setting was the key, because it is a well-known story, but those Norfolk Islander voices hadn't been heard.
What's another series you have produced?
So another one I've done is called Pray Harder, which was a 10-part podcast series, really exposing the inner workings of perhaps one of Australia's most oldest and most secretive religious cults. And I use that word cults based off what former members claimed. So that's was on the Geelong Revival Centre, which is very, very literal biblical interpretations, Pentecostal. They are in their world, they are the only saved people, and that they're doomsday cults. They believe the world's going to end very soon. And really, that series told the stories of what it was like to grow up and be in there, and then the damage that's done when you escape, because basically your family ties are severed when you're on your own. And that was a really, really powerful series, in that I've been inundated after that with cult survivor stories and tips on more revival stuff, but also heaps of other different ones right across Australia. There's much more. Unfortunately, there's a lot here. Like we think of outback America as cult heartland, but there's a lot just in plain sight in Australia. And that's why I'm in a suit today, because going to the parliamentary inquiry. As a result of that podcast, and we were able to meet with the member for Geelong, Christine Cousins, and then she was moved after meeting some of the people in the podcast and hearing their stories, and she set up a meeting with the Attorney General. Can we do something about coercive control? Like, not attacking what people believe. This is not an attack on faith, it's an attack on it's challenging behaviour. And they've set up a parliamentary inquiry looking at recruitment and coercion, which is great outcome for our podcast.
Can you have as big an impact working for your own organisation as you can have working for a large media organisation?
It's not really the point. It's impossible to compete with the might of a big media organisation like a Nine or ABC or News, just with their reach and the channels through which they reach people and their existing audience. But what I do is, and what I did with Pray Harder, is I use my relationships and I'll write copy for them for free to promote my story, my book, the podcast or whatever, which is the main avenue, but just to bring more, make the public more aware. So a lot of going out on your own is maintaining relationships. And, if you've got good journalism, there is a home for it. But and sometimes you go, geez, I wish I was working back there with this story. But a lot of the things I do too aren't, not everything is heavily geared towards just impact. It is impactful journalism, but not, the cut and thrust of daily politics or, things like that. I want to go deeper, and I want to get characters and stories as well. Blending those things. So, it'd be good to have your cake and eat it too. But obviously, then when you work, say you do a project with the ABC, whatever, and it's got news things there, then you do have that opportunity, and you can do interviews across their stations, across the country, and I always try to use all relationships, and I've done stuff for news.com and really segmented all the stories I have across the podcasts and go, this would be a great fit for those guys, an entry point for the readers there into the podcast, and I would frame a story differently for The Age or the Financial Review or whatever.
One story, many spokes, many platforms.
Many platforms, yeah.
So how do you deal with any legal issues that may arise?
obviously very cognizant of defamation risk, and that I do all my own. I mean, when I team up with a commissioner or something, they have their own fact checking and obviously legal. And once we sign a contract, there's obviously, unless I am withholding things or acting in a misconduct kind of way, they take on the defamation risk, but I'm bound then by their legal risk profile, which can be frustrating. But it's the same, just using what I learned at the age is, I think it really helps to bring the lawyers in on the story early and explain your goals, how you're getting your evidence, why you want to do this, what we've got to support, and anyone who's been involved in the pointier end of investigative journalism for a while, you become a bit of a bush lawyer. I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but you know where a line is, you know what the red flags are, and you can sort of bring them to the up early and go, look, we've got this, I'd love to be able to say this, I've only got this to support it, I need more, so I will write a script and actually change the colour of something where I will go like high risk, need more evidence, alternate line, water it down, you know what I mean? So try and mitigate that. But yeah, and then there are some stories I'd love to do that just in our current defamation environment too risky, and you don't want to get tied up in a defamation trial afterwards as someone who needs to earn an income by doing stuff. I need to be able to move on to the next thing.
Did you have to get insurance or?
No, I mean I have the usual work cover and public liability stuff, but I don't have any defamation.
It's very expensive.
Insurance is expensive, and like I said, like when I sell something, they take on the risk. I'm not self-publishing, although with the conspiracy thing, that will be a self-published program. So yeah, we'll have to look at it there.
Yeah, that was great, Richard. I think your example will inspire lots of people who might be considering leaving journalism and maybe a bit wary about getting out into the real world to try their hand at it. But yeah, I think it was a great case study in what's possible.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity. Go follow your dreams. Have a crack.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.